أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من اللعين الغوي الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الميامين المهديين ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لأدلنهم ولأمنينهم ولآمرنهم فلا يبتكن آذان الأنعام ولآمرنهم فلا يغيرن خلق الله ومن يتخذ شيطانا وليا من دون الله فقد خسر خسرانا مبينا. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Today we're going to talk about, and if it spills into tomorrow, we'll finish the subject tomorrow, inshallah. Art, literature, and music, and its connection to the dissolution of religious morality and moral identity. The ayah which I began with from Surah An-Nisa 119 essentially sets the stage where Shaitan is telling God that surely I shall misguide them. لَأُدِلَّنَّهُمْ, I will misguide them. And there's emphasis, there's ta'keed in it. وَلَأُمَنِّيَنَّهُمْ, and I will give them a false sense of aman. It's from the word amina. I will give them a false sense of security, that somehow they will think, as Imam Zain al-Abidin says, oh Allah, I seek refuge in you to think that after this breath I have another breath. النفس بعد نفس or ساعة بعد ساعة or قدم بعد قدم. The Imam says that I seek refuge in you, Allah, to think that after this hour I have another hour. After this step, I have another step. After this breath, I have another breath to take. What Shaitan is saying, لَأُمَنِّيَنَّهُمْ, I'm going to keep them in such a way that they think that they have their entire life ahead of them. Anyone who thinks that they have their entire life ahead of them, and because of that does not hasten to hayya ala khair al-amal, today shall know that they are under the guidance, na'udhu billah, of shaitan. Because this is what Allah, that's what He said, لَأُمَنِّيَنَّهُمْ, and I will make them think that when they commit a sin, it's okay, God will forgive them. That na'udhu billah, someone says that I'll commit a sin, but God will forgive me. As they say, better to ask forgiveness later, right? As the saying goes, na'udhu billah. That it's not a correct saying, but of course, not a morally correct one, but it's a saying, nevertheless. This is from Shaitan. And then he talks about the violation of animals. وَلَا يُبَتِّكُنَّ آذَانَ الْأَنْعَامِ. We don't have time to talk about that. There's some deep, dark stuff going on there about the cutting of the ears of animals. There's meaning to this. These are the dark arts, the cultic arts, the black arts. فَلَا يُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ, and I will change the creation of God, or He will change, the creation of God will be changed. Rather, that's what is being said here. It will be defaced, that there will be an alteration in the creation of God. As I said, the fitrah has no tabdeel. Remember, I've already said that. La tabdeela. There's no tabdeel for the khalq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no replacing it. But it can be altered. When exposed to certain influences, the fitrah can be altered. It can be manipulated. And that's what Satan does. And whoever takes Satan, shaitan, as a guide, they shall be a loser. Now here we are into the bosom of modernity, known as the secular age, where the belief in God and a life guided by God and principles guided by God is no longer axiomatic in this world, in this Western world, Atlantic world, North Atlantic world in which we are in. Why? Because human beings, this is a very long discussion, human beings have created for themselves a new sense of authenticity. What do I mean? There's a new sense of fulfillment, that they find fulfillment in things other than God. So for example, if someone chooses to make their career a priority over something else that is more worthwhile, let's say over raising their children as pious Muslims, because they find authenticity in that, right? They find that they are being fulfilled in that way. As I say, I'm a career-oriented person. No, I'm a God-oriented person. Even when we use these words, I'm a career-oriented person. Yes, I'm not saying we should not pursue careers. I'm saying behind every sentence, there is certain elements that lie behind it that are very dangerous. I'm a career-oriented person. No. Inshallah, I'm a God-oriented person. These small words make a very big difference. And because so many people are so blind and so in need of respiratory care, of immediate spiritual CPR, because they're drinking the Kool-Aid that's out there, literally, they don't realize any of this, right? And then they don't. It's again something that is so ubiquitous. And what we don't realize is that there are certain choices in our life that will have undeniable effects. The spouse that we choose, the media that we consume, the friends that we choose, the vacations that we choose, the places that we choose to go. All of this has profound effects on whether our fitrah within us, that essential essence towards God consciousness, towards taqwa, is alive or not. If somebody chooses to go on a beach vacation, that is an indication of who they are, of the environment that they're putting their children into. I'm not talking about isolated beach. I'm talking about like a beach, the average Western beach. Let's be honest, and I know it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. And then it is what it is. We are what we eat. We are where we go. Nobody's saying we can't rent a house with the private pool like an Airbnb in Florida. We don't have to go to the full, the full resort experience. Yeah, if we want to be, as Satan says, among the people who follow him, or in that group of that lifestyle, where the drinks are flowing, the clothes are off, and the sun is shining. Isn't it? Then after you tell your son or daughter, oh, don't look at that. Come on, this is complete hypocrisy. It's ridiculous. Or we just needed a break from work. Well, there's other ways to take a break. There's other things that we can do. There's other places we can go. And then we come and we say, oh, Maulana, what is Mimbar doing for us? Come on, man. I'm not saying the Mimbar doesn't have a role. Everyone has a role to play, but come on. Take account of yourself first, Baba. Take account at home. The spouse that we choose, the friends that we choose, the media that we choose, the leisure time that we choose. All of this goes into the makeup of a human being. And now where did all this kerfuffle and problems start? World War II. After the Second World War began a period known as post-war affluence. Basically, America got rich, simply put. In the need to develop after the war, and even in the lead up to the war, right, the creation of the war economy, and we're to a certain extent still living in that post-war economy, in a sense, perhaps, to a certain extent. Or at least in the initial impulses that kind of led up to that. Human beings got really excited, and they got a lot of money. I'm going to make this simple. I don't want to go through a whole graduate seminar in history here. People got rich, and they started enjoying their life. And here came a moment known as the creation of the middle class. As the middle class was created, there was this idea that there is virtue in the seeking of wealth for wealth's sake. This was known as the Protestant ethic. There's a long discussion about this. Again, it's not a Muslim problem. This was largely a problem that Christianity had with the world. Muslims didn't have a problem. We found that balance a long time ago. We have principles in our deen that allow both the enjoyment of what is halal and what is good within the boundaries of Allah and while staying on the spiritual path. But Europe and North America were, of course, dealing with this problem. So people began to say, why do I have to go to church when my neighbor is loaded? God's not striking him down with lightning, and he's not even showing up on Sundays anymore. So people started comparing to each other in France, in Britain, in the United States, other places. So naturally, the supply and demand economy kicked into gear, and they began developing new marketing slogans like be yourself, find yourself, release yourself, do your own thing. These slogans came out of the 60s and the 70s, okay? And communities became disattached from one another, right? Because as the rise of the middle class occurred, and everyone started saying, oh, wait a minute, I want a washing machine. Literally, the invention of the washing machine is connected directly to the loss of morality. Yes. I'm not joking. It's not a joke here. This is literally, it's coterminous. Like they happen at the same time. Guess what else? Packaged holidays. The marketing industry started marketing what they call packaged holidays, these inclusive holidays, right, to people. People didn't used to take these kinds of holidays. At the most, they would go camping with their family, they'd go out to nature, maybe go for a day or 2 day trip. There wasn't this 5-day Jamaica package going on. All this started, right? Airfare started getting cheaper, people started taking airplanes, and now let's go to as maximum fisk and fasad. Packaged holidays, washing machines, and there was this whole idea that the pursuit of happiness lies in achieving your material dreams. Now, this always existed. The difference was it was only limited to, let's say, 1% of the population. Very small sliver of society lived this way. Now we have the creation of the middle class. And now everyone wants to participate in the action. And what happens? Oh, they participated in the action. The action of fisk and fasad in the earth. This is where zina becomes allowable. This is where pornography becomes legalized, isn't it, in the 70s? Why? All of this was in a need to satisfy the appetite of the American consumer. Because the American consumer had an insatiable appetite. All right? Na'udhu billahi, right? That we seek refuge in Allah from that appetite, la tashba', right? That has no satiation. It can't be satiated. And that's the amazing thing, because just keep piling in, right? And then what happens is globalization. Right? And now everybody wants to jump on the dream. Everybody wants to get in the action. Everybody wants to take a bite of this. Everybody wants to enjoy. Right? You know, I was in Pakistan recently, and honestly, there were parts that I really thought I was in New York. And I turned to some of the brothers, I said, هذا بلد المسلمين, بلاد المسلم. I said, Shura, what is this? I said, in fact, one person even came up to me and said, Sheikh, you were talking about non-mahram, that it's not good for non-mahram to socialize, right? I find this a little extreme. I said, Allahu Akbar. I said, in our Islamic school, the kids understand this, but you're 18, 20-year-old, brought up in an Islamic country, can't conceive this? Why? Because you're loaded. This is always a problem, people with money. Not always, it tends to be because they think they're from privilege. This is exactly what Taylor says in his 800 pages on the secular age. That it's not all people with privilege, but especially people with privilege think that somehow the ahkam of Islam don't apply to them. Right? It don't apply to them. The rules of mahram, non-mahram don't apply to them. Oh, and their dinner parties, wow. Na'udhu billah. It's like, what's going on here? You won't see that in the lower class, for sure. And as the Prophet says, أَحْمَقُ النَّاسِ مَنْ طَلَبَ الدُّنْيَا. The most ahmaq of people, the most foolish and stupid of people, أَحْمَقُ النَّاسِ مَنْ طَلَبَ الدُّنْيا. The one who runs after this world and becomes deluded by it and thinks that because they have money, they can live a certain way of life, but then they can sponsor a majlis and it's okay. It doesn't take out ma'asi and sin. Sin remains sin. A life of sin remains a life of sin and guna and dunub. It doesn't cancel. It's not an accounting equation. This is called the expressivist revolution of the 1960s, where basically they said, express yourself and be spiritual. Or what did they call it? I'm spiritual without religion. This essentially was a new form of paganism. It is a new form of paganism. J.C. Mills, one of the famous thinkers of the United States, you know what he says? And this guy really influenced the thought of America. He said, pagan self-assertion is better than Christian self-denial. And here comes Elvis Presley, 1956. It all fits in. Elvis comes on the scene, this drug-addicted, satanic, crazy man, majnoon, but not literally in the sense that he's not culpable, comes on the scene with Heartbreak Hotel. It's #1 on the charts in Britain, #1 chart on the charts in America. This new form of music appears at the very same time as the washing machine, as all packaged holidays, as the new access to airplane and air travel. Is it a coincidence? It is not a coincidence. All of these came together. Presley now found mass consumption for his vulgar and just nasty satanic words. Then come the Beatles. Oh, now things obviously are going to heat up even more. And as every year goes by, more and more modesty is lost from American and British and French and Netherlands and European society. More and more modesty is lost, right? For example, they say that it was in the 50s that a woman in Britain would not even leave the house if maybe this much of her leg was showing. Now? And the same goes for men. Men wouldn't, this whole thing of wearing shorts. Okay, you're working out, you're in the gym, that's something else. But, I know people wear shorts to a steakhouse. I'm like, what are you doing? This is no sense of decency. There's no sense of formality. Shorts and flip-flops. Right? So slowly, human beings are losing their modesty. and the music industry and art come together. There's a form of art known as Renaissance art, Expressionist art, which basically exposes the body without clothes. And if you've been to those, I was recently in Cambridge at the Fitzwilliam Museum, one of the most, oldest ancient museums, or important museums in Cambridge that's at least free, in Cambridge, the UK. Almost every other painting was a nude painting, like fully. And everyone's like, pictures and this and that, because it's, the most amazing expression of the human body. This is Renaissance. But again, this form of expression was limited to a very sliver of the society. With the rise of the middle class and all of this facade, fisk, zina, now becomes open game. It's fair game for everyone to participate and play in. Right? And the marketing companies, Hallmark, you name it, they all jump on the bandwagon, and everybody wants to take part now. And as they say, welcome to the American dream. This is the American dream. And the American dream is wrapped up in Beatles mania, although they're a British band, but equally popular in the United States. Did you know that Lennon and McCartney, people were so disturbed? I was reading in an article that when they visited South Africa, for those who know, young people, the Beatles is like, the most famous, band that basically of the 20th century, after which all other music followed suit. Everything that came after the Beatles was following the sunnah of that shaitan. Okay? Simple as that. Everyone learned from them, because there hasn't been a band as successful as them previously. They're basically the Jordan for basketball, okay? People would line up that when McCartney and the gang arrived in South Africa, I don't know if it was Cape Town or Joburg, people were lining up in wheelchairs, hoping that somehow they could be saved and healed by them. And that's when Lenin himself said that we are more popular than Christ himself. This is the 60s and 70s, brothers. Yeah, the baby boomers, they're to blame. Sorry, baby boomers in the room. I'm not blaming all of you, but this is a baby boomer problem. And remember when I said that our children will inherit our sins? The children are inheriting the sins of the baby boomer generation. Because this was a baby boomer. It was the baby boomers that participated in the drugs. It was the baby boomers that participated in all this craziness, discos and whatever, all that shaitan work. Right? This whole disco dancing, it all comes from there. LSD and whatnot. It was huge. Also coupled with what is known as, unfortunately, the women's movement. I'm not denying that there's aspects of the women's movement that are very important, that are 100% supported by the Quran and the Sunnah. But that became somehow attached, and it just went along with the whole thing. My body, my life. And then abortion became a thing. Isn't it? Now we have abortion. Right? This led up to Roe versus Wade. Right? This, what we would call, or our Christian brothers and sisters would call, a culture of death. A culture of death. Right? Where they call it terminating a pregnancy. They don't call it murder. And just for your information, and I double-checked with the Maktab of Sayyid Sistani today, abortion is haram even before the soul enters. It is not halal before 4 months. According to Sayyid Khamenei and Sayyid Sistani. This is a big misunderstanding and misnomer among mu'mineen, that somehow abortion is okay before 4 months. Yes, there are extenuating circumstances, the life of the mother. There's a few very extenuating circumstances in which it is allowed. Otherwise, it is murder. It is the extinguishing of a human life. It is a culture of death. It is not allowed if the child, even if that child has a deformity that will cause it to live only for a few hours, does God not still love that child? Does it not still deserve the love of God? Who is insan to play God? This is a culture of barbarism and death and destruction. Physicians are called upon to protect humankind, not erase them. And Satan said that I will alter the creation of God. It is no coincidence that all of this lines up together. Beatles, Elvis, music, art, package vacations, washing machines, abortion, pornography. They all came in those 20 years or so, right? They all fell into place. And now AI or whatever, who knows what's next? The human beings come up with new ways to kill each other. Who knows what's next? Eugenics, I guess, is the thing, right? And human beings should be proud, huh? Inshallah, I have PhD from MIT. Baba, if that makes you a better human being, alhamdulillah. Otherwise, what do you do with it? I have a doctorate as well. Does it make me a better person? We relish in these things. It just has no meaning in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's just to stroke our own ego and our nafs. PhD, MD, MA, cardiology fellow, this fellow, postdoctoral fellow. What matters is what's in here. I have a doctorate. I'm talking to myself. I'm not talking to others, I'm talking to myself. So what? In the words of Ayatollah Sayyid Ali al-Milani, and I'll remember these beautiful words, one of our very, very great mujtahideen in the holy city of Qom. I recently had the honor to be with him in the city of Karbala. We were at a conference together. It was one of the great honors of my life, just to spend a couple of days with an Ayatollah, like of his rank. We were with another person who has spent his life studying Shiism. But he's not a Shia, he's not a Muslim. But he has all the credentials, mashallah. Oof. European Research Council grant, $1 million to study this, €1 million to study this, all this. I mean, if you look at the CV, I mean, people might be throwing their daughters at him if he wasn't, a non-Muslim. I'm being sarcastic. Agha Milani turns to him and says to him, I mean, this took some guts on Agha's part. This is like 2 days into it. We're outside the Haram of Abi Fadl. We're walking towards the hotel, the residence of Hazrat Abbas, Mujamma al-Hadi, alayhi salam. Ayatollah Milani turns to him and says to him in Arabic, شنو الفائدة في علمك? What is the benefit in your knowledge? What is the benefit? PhD, MD, cardio, whatever, fellow, this, that, this is my position, this is where I've reached. And he looked at him like, are you kidding? Like, he turned to me, he's like, what did he, like, I had to repeat the question to him because he was like, he's looking and he's like, he didn't have an answer. He was just kind of gobstruck and just turned around and just walked back to the hotel. Because don't think like that. It's my career. I've earned money in that. What do you mean? Like, but he says, well, how has it benefited you? Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. And another element of this is, well, there's more to talk about. I'll talk about it tomorrow, inshallah, but there was something I want to drop tonight, and we can continue the conversation tomorrow. Black magic has a lot to do with this. The devil is hard at work. And a lot of these things that have happened have the devil's fingerprint on it. Not only theoretically, but literally. And it's disturbing. But we need to know. Because if we're going to protect our kids, we have to know what we're protecting them from and why. Tomorrow we'll talk about that. The role of the devil, the people that try to communicate with the devil, and how what I've just spoken about is a part of that entire movement. And we have traditions from the Prophet, from the Messenger of Allah to that effect as well. And how mu'mineen can protect themselves from it. From losing their sanctity, from not becoming barbarians, from keeping some sacredness in their life. And we'll also give some solutions to this as well tomorrow, inshallah. So stay tuned tomorrow, inshallah. And today we're remembering the very polar opposite of all of this, isn't it? We're remembering the one who is the polar opposite of this culture of uselessness, this culture of vacuousness. Assalamu alayka ya Saki al-Karbala. Peace be upon the water bearer of Karbala. Ya al-Baneen, you are the mother of 4 boys, 4 children, Abbas, Abdullah, Ja'far, and Uthman. Nearly 12 children of Ali ibn Abi Talib, salamullahi alayhi, were killed in Karbala. And for this man, his entire existence was at the service of his Mawla Hussein ibn Ali. The traditions tell us that as the day of Ashura went on, the children began to wail and to cry and to scream. But as long as their Abbas was there, there was a sense of comfort. There was a sense of security. There was a sense of belonging. Abu Mikhnaf tells us that Abbas asked Imam al-Hussein to assemble the entire family. He had dug a well hoping that some water would come out. Imam had lost almost everyone by now. This was a last-ditch attempt to see if some water can be available. This was not a suicide mission, as we know. Imam is trying everything he can to get water to his Sakina. He's not giving up until the last moment. And at that moment, an arrow is fired by Darimi at Hussein, landing in his shoulder. Hussein takes it out, filling his palms with hands of blood. At this moment, Abbas turns to Hussein and says, Ya akhi, hal min rukhsa? Oh my brother, do you give me permission to go to fight? فَبَكَى الْحُسَيْنِ بُكَاءً شَدِيدًا. Hussein began to cry, he began to weep. Because Hussein knew, as I will mention to you in a bit, that this was the final stand. This was it. This was the final stand, mu'mineen. This was it. But all he could hear is alayna al-atash, alayna al-atash. That we are thirsty, we are thirsty, we are thirsty. Imam turns to Abbas and says, oh my brother, anta sahibul liwa'i, you are my flag bearer, what will I do? My heart pains at letting you go. Because the fall of Abbas meant the end, khatam. This was it, this was the final stand. Wa Husayna wa Imama. He says, if you go, then at least get some water, fetch some water if you can for these children. Abbas goes to Umar ibn Sa'ad and he says, oh Umar ibn Sa'ad, here is Al-Hussein, son of the daughter of the Messenger of Allah, you have killed his companions and his family, and here are his children suffering from thirst. Give them some water, for thirst has burned their hearts. He darts on his horse towards the Furat. The Furat was blocked by 4,000 soldiers. These were now minutes of desperation, mu'mineen. He reaches the glistening river. He begins looking at the river. He bends down. He says, "O soul, after Hussein, nobody counts. Ya nafs, min ba'd al-Hussein honi." That nothing amounts to you after Hussein. This is the kalam of Abbas alayhi salam. Here is Hussein nearing his end while you drink cold water. By Allah, such is not a deed at all enjoyed by my creed. He fills the kirba, the water bag up. He darts back to the tent. Imagine the urgency of Abbas alayhi salam trying to get back to the tent. But he took a route around some palm trees. And he got blocked off. As I said, there were 4,000 soldiers blocking Abbas alayhi salam. فَقَطَعُوا عَلَيْهِ الطَّرِيقِ. The road got blocked. فَأَحَاطُوا بِهِ مِنْ كُلِّ جَانِبٍ. Abbas was now ambushed from every corner. There was nothing that he could do. And now the attack begins, mu'mineen. Arrow after arrow after arrow, spear after spear. The riwayat say it was coming from every direction. There was nothing Abbas could do. There was no way he could defend himself. He was literally being covered and rained upon by arrows. Nawfal al-Arzaq la'natullahi alayh then jumps out and in ambush and chops off the right hand of Abbas alayhi salam. Now the right hand of Abbas alayhi salam is gone. It has fallen to the ground. Before that happened, Abbas transferred the water bag into his left hand. He begins to recite, "Wallah, if you cut off my right hand, I shall forever protect my religion. I shall never leave my Hussein. I shall forever protect the truthful Imam." Just as he continued to ride, Hakim bin Tufayl, hiding behind the tree, jumps out and now he severs the left hand of Abbas alayhi salam. فَحَمَلَ الْكِرْبَ بِأَسْنَامِهِ. Abbas now is carrying the water bag with his mouth, with his teeth. But then they fired another arrow. فَأَصَابَ الْقِرْبَ. And it hit the water bag and the water began draining out. The water bag is now punctured. Abbas alayhi salam is confused. He's looking right and looking left. How is he going to return to the camp now? How is he going to return without quenching the thirst of Sayyidah Sakina? With no arms, Abbas could not defend himself. Arrow after arrow after arrow. There was nothing he could do. An arrow landed in his left eye. And then the blood started coming out from his left eye. An arrow landed in his right eye, alayhi salam. They continued to fire spears at him. There was nothing that he could do. He's just trying to move his body around. According to some traditions, he put his head between his legs, trying to break the arrow out of his eye because he was going blind from the blood. Another arrow came into his chest, alayhi salam. He's covered in blood. There's just seconds, the blood is coming out of Abbas. He says, "Adrik akhak al-gharib." Oh Hussein, come to your brother. Hussein, come to your brother. He began to cry, "Adrik akhak al-gharib. Alayka minni salam, ya Abu Abdullah." He begins to cry out for his brother. But what could Hussein do? Hussein heard those cries, and all Hussein said, "Abbasa, wa Abbasa." Hussein is screaming out the name of his brother. Ya muhjata qalba, oh the blood of my heart. These are the screams of Hussein. Hussein finally reaches Abbas alayhi salam. Hussein now utters these words. He said, "Oh the light of my eyes, oh my partner, akhi ya nur aini ya shaqiqi, you are a part of me. Ya qamara munira, you were my helper. What am I going to do now?" He says, "Ya Allah, Allah shall quench your thirst, Ya Abbas. Sakak Allah ka'san min rahiq. haqq. Allah is going to quench your thirst, my dear brother. In some reports, Abu Abdullah took Abbas's head, he put it into his lap, he began wiping the blood from his eyes, saying, Wa Abbasa. Imam begins to now recite these powerful lines. He says, Al-an inkasara dhahri wa qillati lati. Now my back is broken, my forbearance has waned. Ya Abbas, Ya Abbas, Matima Hussein, Matima Abbas alayhi salam.